They chuckled as she fumbled with crumpled $20 bills to cover the entry fee, their sneers cutting deeper when they spotted her faded nursing scrubs. They scoffed at her audacity to step into their elite gun club, but 3 hours later, those same smirks vanished into stunned silence as Miranda Garcia nailed the most jaw-dropping shot in competitive shooting history with a single bullet. Her name became legend that day, toppling an entire SWAT team with one perfect round. But hold.
Have you ever been shamed for not having enough cash to fit in?
Share your story. My name's Miranda Garcia, and that crisp morning, I approached the entrance with my hospital scrubs peeking out from under a worn jacket, every penny of that entry fee scraped together from 3 months of grueling overtime as a nurse. Little did I know money alone wouldn't cut it at Sterling Arms' exclusive range, where the air buzzed with laughter and gunfire, the echoes of a past I once knew. The glass doors mirrored my tired face, dark circles etched from a 12-hour shift, while the parking lot gleamed with cars worth more than my yearly pay, flaunting vanity plates like operator and tactical, a strange flex for folks desperate to prove their warrior creds. Behind the desk stood Richard Sterling III, strutting like a peacock in pristine SWAT gear that screamed it had never seen real action. Which city of the United States are you watching from? Drop a comment and share with us if you have any confrontation. With the HOA, we will narrate your story on our channel. The creases were too perfect, the patches too clean, and his holster held a custom gold-plated pistol that screamed, "Never fired in anger." His eyes swept over Miranda with the kind of disdain usually reserved for something stuck to the bottom of an expensive shoe. Behind him, the walls were covered with photographs of Sterling posing with various celebrities and politicians, all holding firearms and grinning at the camera. "Can I help you?" he asked, though his tone suggested he'd rather do anything but. The question dripped with condescension, and Miranda noticed how he emphasized the word help as if speaking to a child. When she explained she wanted to use the range, his laugh echoed off the marble walls. "Ma'am, this is Sterling Arms Elite. We're a private facility for serious marksmen," Noddy paused, gesturing at her scrubs and worn boots, "not for casual hobbyists. Our members include law enforcement, military contractors, and executive protection specialists. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at the public range downtown." The other patrons, all dressed in expensive tactical gear that looked fresh from the store, turned to watch the show. Miranda counted at least 7 men wearing matching black polo shirts with the Sterling Arms logo, their pants tucked into combat boots that had never seen combat. Sterling's voice grew louder, playing to his audience. "We maintain certain standards here. This isn't a charity range for nurses looking to play soldier on their day off." He straightened his tactical vest, which jingled with unnecessary attachments, a compass, 3 different multi-tools, and what appeared to be a gold-plated ammunition holder. The contempt in his voice was palpable, and Miranda could feel the eyes of every person in the lobby boring into her. A woman near the coffee station whispered something to her companion, and they both laughed while looking in her direction. Miranda's hands didn't shake as she placed her money on the counter, though inside, old instincts were awakening. The bills were worn from being counted and recounted, saved dollar by dollar from extra shifts and skipped meals. "I can pay this
fee," she said quietly. Sterling pushed the bills back toward her with manicured fingers, his nails gleaming with clear polish. "It's not about the money, sweetheart. It's about maintaining our exclusive atmosphere. Some people belong here and—"
"Some? Well, they just don't." Behind him, a group of men in matching SWAT team jackets snickered. One of them, wearing a name tag that read Victor Petrov, team leader, called out, "Maybe she needs directions to the bingo hall." The laughter that followed felt like sandpaper on Miranda's skin, but she kept her composure. She'd learned long ago that the loudest person in the room was rarely the most dangerous. Victor stepped forward, his thick accent marking him as Eastern European. "Mr. Sterling, perhaps she is lost. The hospital is that way." He pointed dramatically toward the door, earning more laughter from the gathering crowd.
"I served my country," Randa said, meeting Sterling's eyes. "I have every right to be here." Sterling's smile turned predatory, reminding her of hyenas she'd seen on nature documentaries. "Oh, did you? Let me guess. Army cook, motor pool, supply clerk?"
He leaned forward, his fake tactical vest creaking with the movement. "Listen carefully. This facility is for elite operators only, not weekend warriors, not paper pushers, and certainly not nurses playing dress-up." He picked up one of her $20 bills and examined it theatrically. Besides, this wouldn't even cover a box of our premium.
"Ammunition. Our members spend more than this on coffee while they're here." The insult hung in the air like smoke, and Miranda's jaw tightened. Around them, more people had gathered, some recording the exchange on their phones while trying to
look discreet. A man in an expensive suit approached the counter, deliberately shouldering past Miranda. "Richard, are we still on for the VIP session at 2? He asked, completely ignoring her presence. Sterling beamed at him. "Absolutely, Senator. Your private instructor is already setting up Bay 7. He turned back to Miranda with exaggerated patience. "You see, this is the caliber of clientele we serve. State senators, CEOs, professional athletes. Not," he waved his hand dismissively at her scrubs, "hourly workers." The dismissal stung more than Miranda cared to admit. Behind the counter, she noticed a price list that made her eyes water. $500 for a basic day pass, $1,000 for a single private lesson. No wonder they could afford marble floors and crystal chandeliers in a shooting range. Victor Petro stepped closer, his boots, which Miranda now noticed, had lifts to make him appear, taller, clicking on the polished floor. "Mr. Sterling, should I escort this woman out? She is making other members uncomfortable." His hand rested on his holstered weapon, a gesture meant to intimidate. Miranda had seen the same posturing from insurgents who'd never faced real combat, the kind of men who talked big until bullets started flying. "That won't be necessary," she said calmly. "I'm leaving." But Sterling wasn't satisfied with her quiet exit. He needed to make an example. "Hold on," he called out loud enough for everyone to hear. "Let's make sure we're clear. This facility maintains standards for a reason. We can't have just anyone walking in here thinking they belong." He came around the counter, invading her personal space. The smell of his expensive cologne, mixed with gun oil, was overwhelming. "You see," Sterling continued, addressing the room more than Miranda, "places like this exist to separate the wheat from the chaff, the professionals from the pretenders, the elite from the—" He looked her up and down. "Ordinary." He reached out and actually flicked her hospital ID badge. "St. Mary's Memorial." "That's a public hospital, isn't it?" Treating anyone who walks in, the disdain in his voice made it clear what he thought of public service. "Tell you what," he said, with false generosity, "there's a nice little range on the east side. Pistol Pets, I think it's called. Very affordable. They even have ladies' night on Wednesdays." The suggestion was delivered with such condescension that several people actually winced. Miranda looked around the room, memorizing faces. The senator who'd interrupted them was now seated in a leather armchair, sipping espresso from a tiny cup while scrolling through his phone. Two men in business suits were examining a display case of custom firearms, their soft hands betraying their lack of real experience. A woman in designer workout clothes was taking selfies with a pink AR-15, her acrylic nails making it impossible to properly grip the weapon. These were Sterling's elite clientele, people who bought status, not
skill.
"Thank you for clarifying your position," Miranda said evenly. "I'll remember this conversation." Sterling laughed again, the sound grating like nails on a chalkboard. "I'm sure you will. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have real shooters to attend to." The security cameras caught everything. Sterling shoving Miranda's money off the counter, bills scattering across the marble floor like fallen leaves. No one moved to help her pick them up. The members laughed as she knelt to gather her hard-earned cash. And finally, Sterling physically pushing her toward the door with 2 fingers on her shoulder as if she were contaminated. "Security," he called out dramatically, though she was already leaving. "Escort this woman off the premises and make sure she understands she's not welcome back." A burly guard materialized, his hand hovering near his taser. "Ma'am, this way, please," he said, though his eyes held a flicker of sympathy. As Miranda walked away, she heard Sterling telling his audience, "This is why we need to maintain our
standards. Can you imagine letting just anyone in here?" The parking lot gravel crunched under her boots as she left, each step measured and calm. Behind her, raucous laughter spilled from the building. They had no idea who they had just turned away. Little did they know the quiet woman walking away had once saved an entire platoon with a single perfect shot. The drive home was a blur. Miranda's hands gripped the steering wheel of her 10-year-old Honda Civic, knuckles white with suppressed anger. Not at the rejection she'd faced worse in her life, but at the sheer arrogance of it all. The way Sterling had pined for his audience, the way those people had laughed at someone they saw as beneath them. It reminded her of every bully she'd ever encountered, from basic training to the present day. People who mistook cruelty for strength, who confused expensive equipment with actual skill. The radio played quietly, some talk show host droning on about the economy. But her mind was elsewhere. 15 years. 15 years since she'd hung up her uniform, since she'd made the choice that had led her to this moment. Some days, like today, she wondered if she'd made the right decision.
Her apartment was small but clean, a 3rd F floor or walk-up in a building that had seen better days. The door stuck as always, requiring a practice shoulder bump to open. Inside, the walls were bare, except for a single photo. Her mother and her, at Miranda's nursing school graduation, her mother's bald head covered with a cheerful scarf, her smile radiant despite the chemotherapy ravaging her body. Miranda dropped her keys on the counter and opened the fridge, staring at its meager contents, leftover takeout, a half-gallon of milk approaching its expiration date, and a 6-pack of energy drinks for her night shifts. The freezer held ice, packs for sore muscles, and a pint of ice cream she'd been saving for a bad day. Today, qualified. She sank onto her second-hand couch and pulled out her phone, intending to check her work schedule. Instead, she found herself scrolling through old photos buried deep in her gallery, images she rarely looked at anymore. Dust-covered vehicles in Baghdad, grinning soldiers posing with their rifles, a much younger Miranda in full combat gear. In one photo, she stood next to her spotter position, the Barrett .50 caliber rifle almost as tall as her. Someone had written "Ghost Eye" on her helmet in Sharpie. The nickname had started as a joke, but stuck when they realized she never missed, not when it counted. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sarah, her co-worker. "Rough day. Saw you come in looking stressed. Coffee tomorrow before shift." Sweet Sarah, always looking out for everyone. Miranda typed back a quick, "Sure, thanks," and set the phone aside. That night, Miranda dreamed of Baghdad, the heat, the dust, the weight of the rifle in her hands. In the dream, she was back on that rooftop, watching the truck bomb approaching her pinned-down squad. But this time, when she pulled the trigger, nothing happened. The rifle jammed. She watched helplessly as the truck reached its target, as the explosion bloomed like a deadly flower. She woke up gasping, sheets soaked with sweat. 3 a.m., the nightmare hour when all the memories like to come calling. She got up and made tea, sitting by the window and watching the city sleep. Somewhere out there, Sterling was probably in his mansion, sleeping soundly on his ill-gotten gains. The thought made her tea taste bitter. Morning came too soon, and with it another 12-hour shift at St. Mary's Memorial. The hospital was a sprawling complex that served the poorest neighborhoods in the city. Gang violence, overdoses, industrial accidents. They saw it all, and they treated everyone regardless of their ability to pay. It was as far from Sterling's exclusive world as you could get. And Miranda was proud of that. But as she prepped IVs and checked vitals, the previous day's humiliation kept replaying in her mind. Not for herself. She'd faced far worse, but for everyone like her, every veteran who couldn't afford Sterling's fees, every dedicated professional dismissed for their appearance, every person judged unworthy by those who'd never served a day in their lives. During her lunch break, Miranda sat in the cafeteria with Sarah and a few other nurses. The conversation turned to weekend plans, and someone mentioned wanting to learn self-defense. "There's that fancy gun range across town," Maria suggested. "Stealing arms?" "I heard they have classes." Miranda nearly choked on her sandwich. "Don't bother," she said quickly. "They're selective about their clientele." Sarah looked at her curiously. "You've been there?" Miranda hesitated, then told them an abbreviated version of yesterday's events. By the time she finished, the entire table was seething with indignation. "Are you kidding me?" Sarah exploded. "You're the stadiest person I know. Remember last
month when that patient went psychotic and you talked him down while everyone else panicked?" Maria nodded vigorously. "Or when that gang shooting came in and you triaged 6 patients in 3 minutes?"
"I've never seen anyone stay so calm under pressure." Their loyalty touched Miranda, but she waved off their protests. "It's fine, really. Places like that, they're not worth the energy." But Sarah wasn't having it. Someone should expose them. That's discrimination, plain and simple. She pulled out her phone. "I bet they're violating some kind of law. Maybe we could file a complaint or something." Miranda put her hand over Sarah's. "Let it go. People like Sterling always get what's coming to them eventually. If only she'd known. How prophetic those words would be." The afternoon dragged on, filled with the usual chaos of a busy ER. A construction worker with a nail through his hand, an elderly woman with pneumonia, a teenager who crashed his skateboard. Each patient got Miranda's full attention, their pain and fear taking precedence over her own bruised ego. It was during the last hour of her shift that everything changed. Miranda was updating patient charts at the nurse's station when her phone buzzed insistently. Multiple notifications popped up: texts, missed calls, social media alerts. Frowning, she opened her messages. The first was from Tommy, the Vietnam vet who ran the public range where she sometimes practiced. "Miranda, is this you in this video? What happened?" Her stomach dropped. "Video? What video?" Before she could check, Sarah rushed over, her face flushed with excitement. "Miranda, you need to see this. Someone posted a video of what happened to you at Sterling Arms. It's going viral." She thrust her phone at Miranda, and there it was, crystal clear security footage of her entire, humiliating encounter with Sterling. Someone had overlaid captions highlighting the worst moments. "Elite gun range owner destroys nurse for being poor." Veteran nurse humiliated for not being rich enough. Is this how we treat healthcare workers? The video had been shared over 50,000 times in just a few hours, comments poured in by the second, most expressing outrage and support. But what caught Miranda's eye were the comments from veterans. That stance, that's military bearing right there. Look at how she stays calm. That's discipline.
Anyone else notice how she positions herself? That's tactical training. And then the comment that made Miranda's blood run cold. That stance, I'd recognize it anywhere. Ghost Eye, is that you? Wheeler, 2nd Battalion. Her past, it seemed, was catching up with her faster than she'd anticipated.
By the time her shift ended, the video had been viewed over 200,000 times. News outlets were picking up the story, and Sterling Arms was being flooded with angry calls and messages. But Miranda didn't care about any of that. What mattered was that comment from Wheeler, Marcus Wheeler, her spotter from Baghdad, the only person who knew all her secrets. Miranda was still in her scrubs, exhausted from a double shift, when she heard the familiar voice behind her in the hospital parking garage. You always did hate bullies, Garcia. She turned to find Marcus Wheeler standing by the elevator, still built like the linebacker he'd been in high school before joining up. His hair was grayer now, cut military short, and he wore a crisp button D down that couldn't quite hide the warrior underneath. "Marcus," she said simply. "Been a while," he smiled, the same crooked grin she remembered from countless missions. 1 year, 3 months and 12 days, but who's counting? They stood there for
a moment.
2 soldiers pretending to be civilians before Miranda finally asked, "How did you find me?" He shrugged. "Wasn't hard. Kept tabs on you after you left." "Benning?" "Figured you'd want your privacy, so I kept my distance. But when I saw that video," his jaw tightened. "Nobody treats one of mine like that." The possessiveness in his voice was familiar. The brotherhood of arms never really fades. "I'm not one of yours anymore, Marcus. I'm just a nurse now," he snorted. "Right, just a nurse who happens to have the steadiest hands and calmest nerves I've ever seen. Just a nurse who made a shot in Baghdad that physics says was impossible." Miranda started walking toward her car, and he fell into step beside her. "That was a long time ago. Different life, maybe," he conceded. "But talent like yours doesn't just disappear. It's like riding a bike, except the bike is a precision rifle and the stakes are human lives." They reached her Honda, and Miranda turned to face him. "What do you want, Marcus?" He pulled out his phone and showed her something that made her stomach twist. Sterling's social media page featuring a promotional video for something called the Elite Marksman Challenge. "Sterling's doubling down," Marcus explained. "Instead of apologizing, he's hosting this competition, a 100 grand prize, his private SWAT team against all comers. He's using the controversy to promote his brand." Miranda watched the video with growing disgust. Sterling, dressed in even more elaborate tactical gear, boasted about his facility's superiority and the elite caliber of his team. "What's that got to do with me?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "Everything," Marcus said intently. "Miranda, do you know what happened after you left? How many people you inspired? There are female snipers in every branch now."
"All because of you, and this pompous ass is spitting on everything you represent." He leaned forward. "I'm organizing something, a response, and we need Ghost Eye." Miranda shook her head. "I'm not that person anymore, aren't you?" Marcus challenged. "I saw you last week teaching those new nurses how to stay calm under pressure. Saw you handle that violent patient in the ER without breaking a sweat. You're still you, Miranda. You just use different tools now." That night, Miranda sat in her small apartment
staring at a box she hadn't opened in years. Inside were her medals, her certificates, and a single photograph of Delta Company, the 12 soldiers whose lives had changed the course of hers. She picked up the photo, studying their young faces. Most of them had families now, careers, lives they might never have had if not for one impossible shot on a scorching day in Baghdad. The memory came flooding back. Command had said it was impossible, a truck bomb heading for a building where her squad was pinned down. The driver had to be stopped, but he was beyond effective range, the heat creating mirages that made accurate shooting nearly impossible. She had one chance, one bullet, 12 lives hanging in the balance. She'd made that shot, and then she'd made 26 more impossible shots over 3 tours. Each one saving lives, each one adding to a legend she'd never asked for. Her phone buzzed. It was Sarah sending her links to Sterling's latest social media posts. He was milking the controversy, painting himself as a defender of excellence against the participation trophy culture. His followers were eating it up, posting nasty comments about wannabe warriors and glorified servants trying to play with the big boys. Something snapped inside Miranda. She picked up her phone and called Marcus. "Tell me more about this competition." The next morning, she went to see her supervisor at the hospital. "I need a month off," she said. "Personal leave." Her supervisor looked at her over her glasses. "Miranda, you haven't taken a day off in 3 years. Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine," Miranda assured her. I need to take care of something." Within a week, word had spread through military networks. Ghost Eye was coming out of retirement. Veterans who'd served with Miranda reached out, offering support, equipment, training facilities, but she turned them all down. She didn't need their help. She needed to do this her way. Marcus had gathered intelligence on Sterling's competition. It would be held at Sterling Arms, broadcast live on multiple platforms with significant media coverage. Sterling's team consisted of Viktor Petrov, the ex-Spetsnaz operator Miranda had seen that day, and 3 other hired guns with impressive resumes, but no actual combat experience. "They're good," Marcus warned her. "Petrov especially. He's been winning competitions all over the state." Miranda spent her evenings at a small public range on the outskirts of town, getting reacquainted with the fundamentals. The owner, a Vietnamese vet named Tommy, recognized something in her and stayed late to let her practice. "You remind me of someone I knew in the war," he said one night. "Quiet ones were always the most dangerous." Miranda didn't tell him who she was, she just focused
on the basics.
Breathing, trigger control, reading wind path, no fancy equipment, no computerized scopes, just her, a borrowed rifle, and muscle memory that apparently never forgot. The day of registration arrived faster than expected. Miranda drove to Sterling, Arms and her beat-up Honda Civic, wearing her plainest clothes. The parking lot was full of news vans and expensive cars. Sterling had turned the competition into a media circus, complete with banners, food trucks, and VIP seating. She registered as participant 47, using the number from her old unit. The young woman at the registration desk didn't even look up as she handed Miranda her competitor badge. "Good luck out there," she said automatically. "You're going to need it against Sterling's team." The preliminary rounds were exactly what Miranda expected. Basic marksmanship tests designed to thin the herd. She watched Sterling's team show off for the cameras, Petro especially playing to the crowd with trick shots and flashy techniques. When her turn came, she did just enough to qualify, keeping her scores deliberately mediocre. No need to show her hand too early. Sterling himself prowled the range like a predator, offering commentary for the cameras and glad-handing with wealthy spectators. He passed right by Miranda several times without a flicker of recognition. To him, she was just another anonymous competitor, hardly worth noticing. By the afternoon, the field had been cut from 50 to 12. Sterling's four-man team had all qualified. Of course, along with a mix of law enforcement officers, competition shooters, and two other unknowns besides herself. The final event would be held the next day, a complex course of fire that Sterling promised would separate the professionals from the pretenders. That night, in her hotel room, Miranda cleaned her borrowed rifle and thought about what she was doing. This wasn't about the money or even about revenge. It was about something bigger. It was about every person who'd ever been dismissed, overlooked, or underestimated. It was about proving that true skill doesn't care about your bank account or your connections. The final day dawned clear and hot, perfect conditions for long-range shooting. The crowd had tripled in size with bleachers set up for spectators and a raised platform for media. Sterling had spared no expense, turning his range into a stadium. The final challenge was announced with great fanfare. 10 targets would be placed, at intervals from 100 to 1,000 yards. Each target would move unpredictably, activated in sequence. Competitors would have 10 rounds to hit as many targets as possible, but Sterling had added a cruel twist. Wind machines would create artificial gusts at random intervals, making each shot exponentially more difficult. This is what separates real operators from weekend warriors, Sterling announced to the crowd. These conditions simulate real-world variables. Only those with proper training and equipment will succeed. The competition began with the law enforcement officers. They performed admirably, most hitting 5 or 6 targets despite the challenging conditions. Then came the competition shooters, their specialized equipment helping them reach 7 or 8 targets. Sterling's team went next, one at a time. They were good, Miranda had to admit. Using their high-tech scopes and computerized wind meters, 3 of them hit 8 targets each. Then Viktor Petrov stepped up to the line. He was all business now. The showboating set aside, his spotter called out wind readings as he engaged each target methodically. 8 hits, then 9. On his 10th shot, he paused, calculating. The wind machines roared to life just as he squeezed the trigger. The bullet went wide, 9 out of 10. The crowd erupted in applause. Sterling grabbed his microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, that's what excellence looks like."
9 out of 10 under the most challenging conditions imaginable. I don't think we'll see that match today. Miranda was the last shooter. As she walked to the firing line, she could feel every eye on her. The wind whipped across the range, flag
Snapping chaotically. In the crowd, she spotted Marcus, his face calm but his eyes intense. Other veterans had gathered too, their presence a silent show of support. She settled into position, but she didn't immediately prepare to fire. Instead, she watched. The targets moved through their patterns while she observed, memorizing timing and trajectory. The crowd murmured restlessly. Sterling, sensing an opportunity, commented, "The pressure can be overwhelming for some. We may be seeing stage fright in action, but Miranda wasn't frozen. She was calculated." When the targets completed their cycle and reset, she stood up. The crowd buzzed with confusion. Then, deliberately, she ejected 9 of her 10 rounds, letting them fall to the ground with metallic clinks that echoed across the suddenly silent range. Sterling's commentary died in his throat. Even Victor turned to stare. Miranda had 1 round left, 1 shot to answer Sterling's challenge, to prove her point, to represent everyone who'd ever been dismissed or underestimated. She settled back into position, finding that quiet place where time slows and everything becomes clear. The first target appeared, moving left to right. She tracked it, but held her fire. The second activated, then the third. By the time the 7th target was in motion, people were standing, trying to understand what she was doing. Then Miranda saw it, the shot she'd been waiting for. For exactly 2.7 seconds as the mechanical arms moved through their programmed sequence, all 10 targets would align in a perfect diagonal line. The wind would gust at precisely 15 beats from the southwest, creating a predictable deflection pattern. It was a shot that existed only in theory, a mathematical possibility that no one would ever attempt in practice. She adjusted for wind, for distance, for the cumulative deflection that would occur as the bullet passed through each target. The calculations happened below conscious thought. Years of training merging with instinct between heartbeats in that space where everything stops. She squeezed the trigger. The bullet's flight seemed to last forever. It struck the first target at a precise angle, the impact altering its trajectory just enough to find the second target. Physics and probability merged as the round continued. Its impossible path threading through each subsequent target like a needle through fabric. The sound was almost musical. 10 rapid impacts, paper tearing in perfect sequence. The range's voice cracked over the loudspeaker. All targets hit, one shot, 10 hits. The silence that followed was absolute. Then chaos erupted. Spectators were on their feet, some cheering wildly, others arguing about what they'd witnessed. Cameras swiveled toward Miranda as she stood and faced the crowd. "My name is Miranda Garcia," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the range. 15 years ago in Baghdad, they called me Ghost Eye. A month ago, I tried to pay for range time here, and Mr. Sterling told me I didn't belong, said this place was for elite operators, not nurses playing dress-up. She looked directly at Sterling, whose face had gone pale. "Well, Mr. Sterling, real operators don't need fancy gear to prove their worth. They don't need to put others down to feel important. And they certainly don't forget that skill comes from sacrifice, discipline, and service, not from the size of your bank account." The crowd was buzzing now, cameras capturing every moment. Veterans in the audience began sharing stories of Ghost Eye, of shots that had saved lives, of a legend that had inspired a generation of female snipers. Sterling tried to recover, stepping forward with his microphone. "Now wait just a minute. There are rules, procedures." But the crowd wasn't listening to him anymore. They were chanting, "Ghost Eye, Ghost Eye," as veterans and civilians alike shared in the moment. Marcus appeared at Miranda's side, grinning broadly. He took the microphone from Sterling's unresisting hand. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you've just witnessed isn't just remarkable marksmanship. It's a reminder that true excellence doesn't care about your bank account, your connections, or your social status. It cares about dedication, service, and the willingness to stand up for what's right." The judges huddled briefly before announcing their decision. There was no question Miranda had won. The aftermath unfolded quickly. As cameras surrounded Miranda and reporters shouted questions, she made her announcement. The $100,000 prize will be donated to St. Mary's Memorial Hospital's pediatric wing, because unlike some people, I believe in giving back to the community that supports us. The crowd's approval was deafening, but Miranda wasn't finished. "I also have a challenge for Mr. Sterling. Open your doors to everyone, veterans, active duty, law enforcement, medical professionals, teachers, anyone who wants to learn responsible firearms handling. Do that and I'll consider this matter closed. Refuse and I'll use this money to open a competing range right across the street." The threat landed like a bomb. Sterling's investors were already on their phones, no doubt calculating the PR nightmare they faced. One investor, a silver-haired woman in an expensive business suit, was particularly vocal. "Richard, do you have any idea what this is costing us? Our stock prices dropped 12% since that video went viral. 12%, she hissed, waving her phone like a weapon. Sterling tried to maintain his composure, but sweat was beginning to bead on his forehead. "This is just temporary. Once this blows over, but another investor cut him off. Blows over. She just made an impossible shot on live television. Every news outlet in the country is running this story. We've got veterans organizations calling for boycotts, senators demanding investigations into our membership policies, and now she's threatening to open a competing facility. Within minutes, Sterling was surrounded by agitated board members, their whispered conversations growing increasingly heated. His longtime friend and business partner, Robert Blackwood, pulled him aside. "Richard, I've known you for 20 years. I've stood by you through 3 divorces and 2 SEC investigations. But this is different. You didn't just insult some random nurse. You humiliated a genuine American hero in front of cameras. The board's already drafting your resignation letter." Sterling's face went from red to white. "You can't be serious."
"This is my range. I built this place from nothing." Robert shook his head sadly. "No, Richard."
"You built it with our money, and you've just made it worthless with your arrogance." By the end of the week, the inevitable had happened. Sterling was forced out by his board of directors. His carefully cultivated image shattered beyond repair. The final board meeting was brutal. Sterling tried to argue his case, pointing to profit margins and membership numbers, but the investors were done listening. "Your membership policies have exposed us to multiple discrimination lawsuits," the board chair said coldly. "Your public statements have alienated half our customer base, and your personal conduct has become a liability we can no longer afford." Security escorted Sterling from his own building as news cameras captured every humiliating moment. A new management team took over, led by Patricia Martinez, a former Army colonel and small business owner. Her first act was to stride into the lobby and personally remove the members only sign. "Liberty Range is now open to all who respect firearms and each other," she announced. Within 24 hours, she had implemented policy changes. Free range time for veterans, discounted rates for first responders and medical personnel, and a youth scholarship program. He also reached out to Miranda personally, inviting her to help shape the range's new direction. The story could have ended there, but life rarely wraps up so neatly. Victor Petrov approached Miranda a month later as she was finishing a shift at the hospital. "Miss Garcia," he said, his accent thick with emotion. "I need to apologize. I was arrogant, disrespectful. In my country, we have a saying, the loudest dog is usually the most frightened. I was that dog." His humility surprised her. "What do you
"Want, Victor?" "To learn," he said simply. "Real skills, not showmanship. Would you teach me?"
And that's how Miranda found herself back at Sterling Arms, now renamed Liberty Range, as a consultant and instructor. The pretentious decor was gone, replaced with practical, welcoming spaces. The parking lot filled with working vehicles instead of luxury cars. 3 months after the competition, something remarkable happened. A group of young nurses from Miranda's hospital showed up for their first shooting lesson, nervous but determined as she helped them with their stances and grips. One asked, "Miranda, is it true you turned down $1 million contract to keep working at the hospital?" She smiled, adjusting the nurse's grip slightly. "Money isn't everything. Sometimes the best shot you can take is the one that helps someone else find their aim." The transformation of Sterling Arms, now Liberty Range, became a case study in community building. Veterans shared knowledge with civilians, police officers trained alongside teachers, and kids learned discipline through marksmanship. The walls that Sterling had built came down, replaced by bridges of understanding. A year later, on the anniversary of the competition, Liberty Range hosted its first Community Day. It was a far cry from Sterling's exclusive gatherings. Families picnicked on the lawn while children learned gun safety. Veterans shared stories and skills while local police ran demonstrations. The highlight was the unveiling of a simple plaque by the entrance, Excellence has no dress code in honor of Ghost Eye. As Miranda stood there, watching a young girl take her first shot under Victor's patient instruction, she thought about the journey that had brought them here. One man's prejudice had sparked
a movement. One moment of disrespect had led to widespread change. One impossible shot had opened doors for thousands.
That evening, as the celebration wound down, Miranda sat with Marcus and Victor, sharing stories and laughter. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and reds. "You know," Victor said thoughtfully, "I used to think shooting was about equipment, about technology, but you taught me it's about something else entirely." "What's that?" Miranda asked. "Heart." He said simply, "The willingness to stand for something bigger than yourself." Marcus raised his glass. To Ghost Eye, who reminded us all that true strength isn't about keeping others down, it's about lifting them up. Today, 2 years after that viral video, Miranda still works her shifts at St. Mary's Memorial. The pediatric wing has new equipment thanks to the prize money, and she's lost count of how many lives it's helped save. Just last week, the new cardiac monitor purchased with competition winnings detected an irregular heartbeat in a newborn that might have otherwise gone unnoticed. The baby underwent successful surgery the next day. "You saved another one, Ghost Eye," Dr. Martinez had said with a smile, using the nickname that had somehow followed Miranda from the battlefield to the hospital. But twice a week, Miranda teaches at Liberty Range, passing on skills and values to a new generation. Her classes are always full, with waiting lists stretching months into the future. She's developed a unique curriculum that blends marksmanship with mindfulness, teaching students that the greatest battles are often fought within ourselves. Richard Sterling. Last anyone heard, he was selling used cars in Austin, his tactical dreams as deflated as his reputation. Someone had spotted him at a dealership called Honest Rick's Previously Owned Vehicles, wearing a polyester suit instead of tactical gear, his gold-plated pistol replaced with a clipboard. The local news had run a Where Are They Now segment, showing him demonstrating the features of a minivan to a skeptical customer. The mighty had indeed fallen. His fall from grace was swift and complete, a cautionary tale about the dangers of arrogance and exclusion. Sterling had tried to stage a comeback, launching a YouTube channel called Tactical Truth, but his subscriber count never broke triple digits. His last video, titled "The Liberal Media Conspiracy Against Real Patriots," had 17 views, 15 of which were probably his own. The video of Miranda shot has been viewed over 100 million times, analyzed by physics professors and attempted by countless shooters. The Discovery Channel had produced a documentary called The Impossible Shot, featuring ballistics experts and computer simulations trying to replicate Miranda's feat. MIT published a paper on the physics involved, while high school math teachers used it as a real-world example of trajectory calculations, but most never understand what made it possible. It wasn't about the physics or the equipment, it was about seeing what others missed, about patience and preparation meeting opportunity. As Miranda often told her students, the shot isn't made when you pull the trigger, it's made in all the moments leading up to it. In every choice, every practice session, every time you choose discipline over comfort. Miranda received a letter recently from a young woman in Afghanistan, a soldier who'd watched her shot and read her story. She wrote about facing discrimination. In her unit, about being told she didn't belong. But Miranda's example had given her courage to persevere. She's now the top marksman in her battalion. The letter sits in Miranda's locker at the hospital next to her nursing credentials and a photo of the original Delta Company. It reminds her daily that our actions ripple outward in ways we can't imagine. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is simply show up as ourselves, refusing to let anyone else define our worth. As Miranda reflects on the journey, sitting in her small apartment, with her old Remington cleaned and oiled beside her, she thinks about all the people who've been told they don't belong. The nurses working double shifts, the veterans struggling to find their place, the kids who dream big but lack resources. To all of them, she would say this: your shot is waiting. It might not be with a rifle. It might be with a scalpel, a pen, a keyboard, or a kind word. But when your moment comes, don't hesitate. Take your shot, because excellence doesn't care about your bank account, your connections, or your fancy equipment. It cares about heart, dedication, and the courage to stand up when everyone else sits down. The other day, a reporter asked Miranda if she had any regrets about how things played out. Did she wish she'd handled it differently, maybe avoided the confrontation altogether? She thought about it for a long moment before answering. "My only regret," she said finally, "is that it took me so long to realize that being underestimated is actually a gift. It gives you the element of surprise. It lets you show the world that true strength often comes in unexpected packages." Though, to everyone watching this, the question stands: what's your impossible shot? What barrier have you been told you can't cross? What dream seems out of reach? Drop a comment below and share your story, because every single one of us has a sterling in our lives, someone who tries to make us feel small, inadequate, unworthy. But we also have a choice. We can accept their judgment, or we can prove them wrong. Remember, Miranda is still just a nurse who works extra shifts and drives a beat-up Honda. She still shops at thrift stores and clips coupons. But she also holds the record for the most impossible shot in competitive shooting history. Not because she's special, but because she refused to let someone else's prejudice define her limits. In the end, that's what this story is really about. Not the shot, though people still talk about it in hushed tone. Not the competition, though the video continues to inspire people worldwide. Not even the vindication, though watching Sterling's empire crumble was deeply satisfying. It's about the power of standing up, not just for yourself, but for everyone who's been dismissed, overlooked, or underestimated. It's about turning a moment of humiliation into a movement for change. It's about proving that excellence isn't something you buy. It's something you earn through dedication, sacrifice, and the willingness to help others. As the sun sets on another day at Liberty Range, Miranda watches a group of teenagers, some from the roughest neighborhoods in the city, learning discipline and respect through marksmanship. Their instructor, Viktor Petrov, the man who once mocked her for being just a nurse. Now he teaches with patience and humility, passing on not just skills, but values. Nearby, a class of senior citizens practices gentle yoga before their shooting session, while a group of veterans shares coffee and stories in the new community room. The place Sterling built to exclude has become a place that includes. The walls meant to divide now support a roof that shelters all. And Miranda, she's exactly where she belongs, helping others find their aim. Whether it's with a rifle at the
range or a needle in the ER, because in the end, the most powerful weapon isn't what you hold in your hands.
It's what you hold in your heart. The courage to stand up, the wisdom to lift others, the strength to turn prejudice into progress. So take your shot, whatever it might be. The world is waiting to see what impossible thing you'll do next. And remember, sometimes the quietest person in the room is the most dangerous, not because of what they can destroy, but because of what they can build. Stay humble, stay focused, and never let anyone tell you where you don't belong. Your excellence will speak louder than their prejudice ever could. Thank you for watching this story. If it moved you, if it inspired you, or if it reminded you of your own impossible shot, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because sometimes all it takes is one story, one example, one perfect shot to change everything. And who knows? The next ghost eye might be watching right now, gathering courage for their moment. Be ready, your shot is coming.